The Russian and Chinese navies held their first joint patrol in the Western Pacific Ocean this week, with 10 warships, 5 from each country, completing a near circle around Japan's main island of Honshu. According to the Russian Defense Ministry, the objective of the joint patrol was to, quote, demonstrate the state flags of Russia and China, maintain peace and stability in the Asia-Pacific region, and also protect facilities of both countries' maritime economic activity. So what should we make of this troubling show of unity between two of America's leading antagonists on the world stage? Dean Cheng is a senior research fellow at the Heritage Foundation. He joins us now. Dean, good to see you again.
Thanks for having me again.
All right, let's start with the basics here. A lot of people watching probably be hearing about this for the first time. It hasn't gotten a ton of media attention, but for those who are national security watchers and concerned about the rise of China in, well, recent years and recent weeks too, tell us, what were the basics here? I mean, what was this joint naval patrol all about? Why was it the first time?
So what we saw, and if you take a close look at the clip, you'll see some of the most modern warships in both the Russian and Chinese navies, basically sailing through international waters, which is the straits separating some of the Japanese home islands. This is part of a larger, broader set of things. We've watched the Chinese and Russians do joint air patrols. They've gone into the Japanese and South Korean air defense identification zones together. They've held ground force exercises in both Russia and now China. All of this is basically an effort on the part of both Beijing and Moscow to signal Washington, Tokyo, Berlin, and elsewhere, you're not facing one of us, you're facing both of us. And not with old equipment or obsolete weapons, but very modern systems.
So what is the status really of the Russian and Chinese diplomatic and military relationship? Is there a burgeoning alliance here? Is the idea that the two of them can work together to push out into their spheres of influence more? And therefore, perhaps you got NATO on the west for Russia. You've got the island chain nations, Japan, the Philippines, all the island chain nations that have, up to this point at least, been something of a strategic box in for China. Are Russia and China going to team up? Is that a real thing?
I think up until about a year ago, most people would have said that a lot of this stuff was really posturing. Sure, you wind up with a brigade of Chinese troops quote unquote cooperating with the Russians or vice versa, but that's not the same thing as NATO, where you have an integrated command structure and integrated forces that are always operating together. But this summer, we saw something very unique. We saw Chinese and Russian troops so integrated, you were watching Russian infantry coming out of Chinese armored personnel carriers, and they were using an integrated common set of command control communications and computer equipment. That's actually very impressive. So I think what we are watching is a steady uptick in the level of cooperation, which goes to the broader political point of whether or not we're allied. You, the rest of the world, need to worry about whether we're allied. And I do think that we should always be wary of the possibility that these two countries could well coordinate. So it's not that Russian bombers will strike targets that the Chinese designate, but if China went after Taiwan, would Russia take advantage of that time to go after Poland or the Baltics or Ukraine? In the past, that was unlikely. Now I think we have to think of it as a very real possibility.
What was the reaction from leaders of nations in the region, and particularly U.S. allies like Japan, South Korea? Did they feel like this was a provocation? Are they concerned about this Russia-Chinese possible alliance?
Japan is absolutely concerned. Either Russia or China is going to pose an enormous threat to Japan. Japan doesn't have nuclear weapons. It relies on the American alliance to provide nuclear deterrence. And the Chinese in particular have been making louder and louder noises about how hostile Japan is. South Korea is a somewhat different situation. On the one hand, they have been worried about these intrusions into their air defense identification zone. But the South Koreans also look at Japan as very unfriendly because of a long and very checkered history there. I will note that White House Press Secretary Psaki said she and the Biden administration welcome stiff competition from China. That's not typically the kind of thing you hear from past presidents about welcoming this sort of challenge from the Chinese.